first cultural placemaking strategy that I wrote or co-wrote was the Heart of London Business Alliance's cultural strategy for the wider area of the West End, and it came at a time when we really needed it. So it was during lockdown. It was all about rethinking the proposition, not just looking at tourism, but what does London mean to the UK and to the domestic market, but also next-gen talent. People forget the next-gen patrons of our institutions are the children. So where do they see themselves in that story? And then straight after that, I did the cultural placemaking strategy for East Village. So working with Get Living and helping them develop a new story for the former Athletes Village. The Olympics was great, but we've got to look at the next 50 years. What's the story for the regeneration of Newham? There was a footnote on one of the architect's drawings that spoke about student accommodation that was part of the deliverables for the new buildings they were building. And I just had to keep pressing, what university is this? And it transpired it's the student accommodation for the London College of Fashion. And as a journalist, I've written about LCF and UAL and their innovation in biotech and what that's doing for bringing foreign direct investment. And I literally put my hands on the desk and I said, wait a minute, you're bringing 1,000 of London's most cutting edge designers into this village. What will this do? What will this do to the ground floor commercial? How are you going to pull that into your story? So the catalyst really was the realization that as part of their new infrastructure, they were folding in almost like a residential commercial hub to East Bank. And, as I said, London-born Londoner, I'm always conscious that this is not going to be gentrified. It has to be something that pulls in the local residents that are creative into that story. So with that strategy, the catalyst was obviously UAL, but then looking at it from a broader point of view, Newham is also part of the fashion district. And that's actually a GLA-backed initiative with all of the 5 East London boroughs working together to almost say, look, our historic legacy for London was we were the textiles producers. So how can we think about that in the future? So pulling them into the fashion district story, so creating the narrative that by 2025, East Village will be the gateway to East Bank, London's fashion district, and then building it back. So, okay, well, how do we make that true from 2020 onwards? So that was how we got what was essentially a residential area, as you say, in one of the forgotten parts of Stratford, to be something much more valuable to the locals than it would be simply selling, or renting luxury flats. So the most visible illustration of that strategy is the Lab E20. It's a space that I developed with Christopher Rayburn out of that strategy. So the first project was this idea that they should seed essentially a new creative industry cluster across their ground floor commercial. And so thinking about anticipating those future students, thinking about the school children in the area, thinking about making the regeneration story more accessible at ground floor. So that's really how we were able to do that. And I think it all still starts with what's the story? Like, what's the next story for this area? And you kind of try and pull what's already there rather than parachuting it in. The Heart of London cultural strategy, it then evolved into the Arts Quarter, which I co-authored. It's an opportunity to reintroduce ourselves to the general public, in particular to the domestic market, and in particular to school children that wouldn't normally come to London, beyond the commuter belt. So my place in that really, I would say in very simple terms, is I safeguard the pipeline. The talent pipeline for the West End has been taken for granted, I think. Westminster City Council are very conscious of the fact that their school leavers are heading east. If you work in the creative industries, you don't think, oh, I'll set up a shop in Soho. No, you think Shoreditch, you think Dalston, you think East Village. And so I've had to almost help bridge that gap of awareness to say, no, we need to start messaging from now that there are things for these young people to do when they leave here. And I'm not just talking about the nighttime economy or F&B, that's all relevant, but if you think about the core things that make the West End interesting, you've got theatre, film, visual arts, creative tech, to an extent, still there's a lot of craft in Jermyn Street and Savile Row. Well, who are the next generation tailors? How are they being initiated into the West End's ecosystem? So that's really where I sit in that conversation, is making sure that the developers, the higher education partners, the council, and the local businesses are all tackling that challenge, because without next-gen footfall, what do we have? And working closely with Hackney, particularly their regen team, in making sure that learning from the lessons of the Silicon Roundabout, that what we do going forwards actually helps to bring the local residents from more diverse backgrounds into tech, into design, and making sure this whole narrative around sustainable design in London, we can actually genuinely have some flagship sites that can be used as exemplars, in 50 years from now. And then on the other side of town, I'm working in Knightsbridge in looking at the public realm between Harrods, Harvey Nichols and Sloane Street, and again making sure that whilst it's brilliant that we have these hotspots for tourism, where is the story for grassroots British design, grassroots British craft, and local rural borough of Kensington and Chelsea talent? Making sure that wherever I'm present, we can mitigate that north-south divide in the borough, where we know there's huge talent in the north of Kensington. What I see post-COVID, which actually I'm fascinated in, is London is actually reverting back to its tribal roots. My parents' generation, you had north, south, east, west, very competitive. We're getting clusterings that are happening organically where the West London Alliance, for example, those 7 West London boroughs have all got together to work together to create their own story for placemaking and for direct investment, conscious of what's happening in East London. At the same time, you've got East Bank coming together, bringing together UCL, London College of Fashion, Sadler's Wells, BBC Symphony Orchestra. Then you've got Lambeth waking up in the south, and they've clustered with Southwark, Lewisham and Wandsworth with the SE1 cluster and thinking about life sciences. Same with North London. Camden's coming back strong, not just with cold drops, there are other schemes that are coming forward. So I think as a Londoner, I'm actually very excited because during times of hardship, we do band together, but we also know that we've got to fight, we've got to scrap. And it's not simply an assumption that we'll forever have a endless trickle of foreign direct investment. These councils now realise they are the gatekeepers for the prosperity of their own residents. And I think that is the most exciting thing, because I think if you leave creatives and entrepreneurs in a room together, they make magic. So I actually think, although we are sliding into a recession, everyone has to grit their teeth. I think on the other side of it, the London that will be birthed from that will be much more resilient and actually a much more interesting place.